mostly cardiovascular management, but we haven't focused about any particular medicine Kawasaki. So coming to the introduction, the Kawasaki disease is a systemic vasculitis that occurs predominantly in infant and young children. A typical presentations of Kawasaki disease disruption in the form of like intestinal pseudo-obstruction, tonsillitis, or hemorrhagic serous effusion like pleural effusion, cardiac effusion, and thrombocytopenia. But the acute scrotum is a rare entity and rare complication of Kawasaki disease and not as well recognized as other manifestations of the disease. So unexpected presentations such as testicular hydrocele, timely diagnosis is essential to reduce the treatment delay. So coming to the demography of my patient, the patient name Shivang Nayan, he is a 4-year-old male child. The weight is 12 kg and height is 112 centimeter. Address from the Patna, Bihar. The duration of the stay is 10 days. The informant is mother and father. So coming to the case characteristics. So on presentation, the child has fever for 12 days and swelling and pain in the left sided scrotum for 7 days. The fever is continuous, high grade. The documented is 103 and associated with chills and rigors. And on the hydrocele, the swelling in the left sided scrotum is sudden in onset and progressive in nature, associated with pain and redness, not radiating to other side, not associated with any aggravating or limiting factor, and no prior history of trauma. So, and no association with cough, cold, difficulty breathing, vomiting, pain abdomen, and loose stool, headache, convulsions, altered sensorium, and any burning maturation, and rash over the body, redness of the tongue, red or cracked lips, and redness of the eyes, swelling of hand and feet, and skin peeling around the fingernails, and joint or bony pains. Coming to the examination, and local examination, there is no lymphadenopathy and any ictus pallor or edema and clubbing. And coming to the local examination, on scrotal examination, there is tenderness is present and there is local rise of temperature also, but the transmitter test is positive and I got the get above swelling is present. On systemic examination, we couldn't find any significant, like in RSS, even GIT, the liver is only 2 centimeters palpable, but the liver span is normal. We done the investigations and workup. The hemoglobin is 9.3. The anemia for the is less for the age, and WC count is rise, that is 19,280. Platelet, there is thrombocytosis, that is the 6,09,000, and elevated ESR 54. C-reactive protein is just borderline, and albumin is 3.54. There is increased ALT, AST, and alkaline phosphatase, and the procalcitonin is negative, and serum sodium 133. So, how we reach the diagnosis of Kawasaki disease? Initially, the child is presented in the outside the hospital for 3 days. They have treated in the line of infections and the child received IV antibiotics. Even though the child received IV antibiotics for 3 days, the symptoms were not resolved. For that, the child referred to our center. The child presented to our center on day 4 of illness. So we kept the differential diagnosis as acute epididymitis, but there is no on fluorescence, there is no urine routines, no pyuria, and urine culture is sterile. Fever is not subsided even after 10 days of antibiotic. Outside 3+, in our center is 7 days. We thought of torsion of testes, but UVC Doppler is normal blood flow and chromatic reflex is present. Coming to in MIC, we thought also MIC also, but the serum ferritin within normal limit, and there is no major renal or GIT involvement, no myocardial dysfunction. And we screened for other atypical infections also, like scrub typhus, malaria, leptospira, dengue, and viral fever, and TB was also negative, and no hematologic involvement, like no history of bleeding manifestation, and PBS is normal picture, and reticulocyte count is within normal limit. So even though the child do not have the typical features of Kawasaki disease, there is a history of prolonged high-grade fever with increased ESR, with presence of 4 laboratory criteria, like anemia for age, platelet count is 6,09,000, WC count is increased, ALT is raised. This leads to the diagnosis of incomplete disease of Kawasaki, along with the atypical presentation of testicular swelling. So, in that time, we did the 2D echo, is a normal study. So, the child received IVG on 7th day of hospital admission at the dose of 2 gram per kg, we infused over 12 hours, along with aspirin. The temperature pattern we can see on presentation, child at 99 Fahrenheit degrees Celsius. Throughout the stay, the child received the antibiotic like injection, meropenem and vancomycin also. For that also, the child was not responded. The fever is like higher, only 101, 102 degrees Celsius Fahrenheit. On the 7th day of administration of IVIG, the fever pattern slowly decrease and touches the baseline. You can see the scrotal swelling also. Initial on presentation, there is redness and increase in scrotum scrotum. After the IVIG infusion over 7 days, the swelling is decreased. So some of the articles which have presented in the international journals, the first case was reported with acute scrotum in 1980. The child was with the duration of acute onset of scrotum and 5 days of admission. The resolution take over the 9 days. There are several studies like Psycho et al., Katayama and Mukherjee. They Cabini presented 5 case studies, and JBK 2013. This article is on the acute scrotum in Kawasaki disease, and 2 case reports in literature have taken from. So discussion, the accurate early diagnosis can avoid their unnecessary surgical interventions, and acute hydrocele can also be clinical feature of Kawasaki disease. So diagnostic dilemma, if the clinician have any diagnostic dilemma regarding inflammatory process, should always consider Kawasaki disease as a potential differential diagnosis. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
You have shown that after IVIG, almost took more than 48 hours for the fever to come out.
Yes, ma'am.
So did you repeat echo any time, or did you?
No, actually the child came for 3 times in our body follow. 3 visits also the echo findings are normal, ma'am.
Did you repeat IVIG if the patient was febrile even after 48 hours?
Ma'am, actually after 48 hours there is only 1 spike of fever documented, ma'am. After that there is no fever spikes.
Okay, and inflammatory markers, pro-BNP, everything else was normal?
Pro-BNP, ma'am, in a setting we haven't done actually. The inflammatory marker, the ESR, CRP, we did, ma'am, actually. That was in decreasing tendency, ESR. Sir, currently the child is receiving the tablet aspirin, sir. 3 mg per kg per dose. Currently the child is on the 5th week of the disease. Only aspirin.
I would like to invite Dr. Shreya Mehta for the presentation.
Myself, Dr. Shreya, graduate student from AIMS Patna. I'm going to discuss a case of giant coronary aneurysm who was treated for rivaroxaban for long-term thromboprophylaxis. So, Kawasaki disease, as we know, is the most common cause of acquired heart disease in children, and large coronary artery aneurysms are at high risk for thromboocclusive and stenosis and acute coronary syndromes. So, according to the AHA, it is recommended that such children should receive antiplatelet and anticoagulant therapy, and the standard treatments used for this are usually warfarin and enoxaparin. However, injection enoxaparin in small children possesses different challenges. Direct oral anticoagulants like rivaroxaban have been recently FDA approved for pediatric children and pediatric population, and its administration is quite easy as well as its monitoring is easy. So we had a case of 17-month-old male child who had presented to us with chief complaints of high-grade fever, redness of eyes, and desquamation of hands and cracking of lips for last 6 days, and associated with bilateral swelling in the hands and the feet. So initially in outside hospital, he had received 5 days of IV antibiotics. As there was persistent fever even on IV antibiotics, he was referred to the local district hospital where he was diagnosed as a case of Kawasaki disease, and the first dose of IVIG was given on day 8 of its illness. As the fever was still persistent, a second dose was given in the same hospital on day 11 of the illness. Even after the 2 doses of IVIG, the child was febrile and so was referred to our center. On presentation, the child had following symptoms on examination, like cracking and redness of lips with this rash, perianal desquamation, and swelling in bilateral hands. A 2D echo findings had shown significant changes. There was a large coronary artery aneurysm in the left ascending descending artery, and with a Z score of 13.95, and the in laboratory parameters was showing increased platelet count with raised ESR and CRP, and hypoalbuminemia with hyponatremia. So, with the intensification of treatment, the child was started on infliximab, and after 48 hours of a period of afebrile period, he was shifted to the antiplatelet dose of aspirin, and clopidogrel was added. And for the thromboprophylaxis was started on enoxaparin prophylaxis dose. But the issues with the enoxaparin was that there was discomfort of daily injections, subcutaneous injections, which had to be given by the parents. Secondly, it was difficult to adjust the dose because the child was just 9 kgs. His dose was around 0.05 mg, and the available enoxaparin is at 10 mg per 0.1 ml. And it was very difficult to keep the anti-10A activity assay within the limits. Also, there was risk of recurrent infections, and the child had presented to us with multiple episodes of bleeding. This was a bleed on trivial trauma, also one episode of severe bleeding from mouth. Now, rivaroxaban, American Heart Association also says that we can consider direct oral anticoagulants, and rivaroxaban is given orally. There is no need for frequent monitoring, immediate onset and offset of action, few drug and food interactions as in case of warfarin. It has stable pharmacokinetic and pharmacodynamic profile. Its use in other heart diseases has been shown in the UNIVERSE trial, and but there are no RCTs comparing the different anticoagulants. The only available case series are one in which they had used rivaroxaban in an infant of 6 months, and a second case series in which the rivaroxaban was used in a child of 8-year-old with giant coronary artery aneurysms. This is a trial which is to be started in China for comparing rivaroxaban with standard anticoagulants which we use, such as enoxaparin and warfarin. So, concluding that the refractory KD, it has its early recognition and timely escalation of therapy is crucial, and large coronary artery aneurysms in Kawasaki required sustained prolonged anticoagulation and follow-up. There are no RCTs to guide the anticoagulation therapy, and direct oral anticoagulants, as we had discussed few days before, are safe and effective for thromboprophylaxis, especially in small children. And it has undeniable advantage over the warfarins and low molecular weight heparins. And further studies needs to be established for its safety and efficacy, and it can play a major role in future. Thank you. Ma'am, this cost around 2,160 rupees for a month. It's 2.5 mg tablet is available. That this child being under scheme, Jan Arogya scheme, he was getting it freely in our hospital. And rivaroxaban was available at our centers.
And infliximab, what is the dose normally you give?
It was given at 10 mg per kg. It's 5 to 10. But as the child already had developed giant aneurysms, 10 mg dose was given.
Is it essential to monitor for platelet count going forward?
Sir, I didn't get.
Is it essential to monitor platelet count?
No, sir. Platelet count for sir, the child is on aspirin, so platelet count monitoring for that as a side effect is very important. For For long term, sir, you are asking for long term.
Continuously monitor to follow possibility.
Yes, sir, we are keeping the child is on rivaroxaban for last 8 months, sir. And after that, there has not been any major bleeding episodes.
So after this, for next presentation, I would like to invite Dr. Alfred for his presentation.
Good afternoon, respected judges and distinguished faculty and my dear friends. Today I will be presenting a case report. So this is actually being presented on behalf of my postgraduate MD Pediatrics Post-Graduation Center. I was in Madras Medical College. I had seen this child during my MD days. So I'm presenting on behalf of Madras Medical College. So we had seen a 12-year-old girl who had presented with fever, rash over the abdomen and legs and abdominal pain for 5 days duration. Examination revealed a febrile, icteric and lethargic child with cracked and erythematous lips. She had reddish palpable purpura over the legs and hyperpigmented rash over the abdomen. Skin peeling over fingers was noted at admission itself. She had a cervical lymphadenopathy, tender hepatomegaly, and rest of the examination and vital signs were unremarkable. So the first picture demonstrates the erythematous and cracked lips and the hyperpigmented rash in the abdomen and the reddish palpable purpura in the lower limbs and the skin peeling in the finger at admission itself. Investigation revealed neutrophilic leukocytosis and thrombocytosis, direct hyperbilirubinemia with transaminitis, elevated inflammatory parameters. Ultrasound done showed mild hepatomegaly with periportal thickening, also peripancreatic lymphadenopathy with gastric antral thickening. Echocardiogram showed normal coronaries. So with the diagnosis of atypical Kawasaki disease, because of the abnormal ultrasound, we further did a CT abdomen that showed necrotic pancreatic and periportal lymph nodes with duodenal and gastric wall thickening with mild ascites. So because of the wall thickening with the lymphadenopathy, we had also done an upper, and child had severe abdominal pain. So we had also done an upper GI endoscopy that showed acute severe duodenitis and gastritis, which was correlated on the histopathological examination of gastric and duodenal biopsy specimens. Skin biopsy was taken from the skin lesions in the lower limb that also showed lymphocytic infiltrate, but the mucosal and skin biopsy were negative for immunofluorescence. This is the endoscopy picture of the inflamed gastric and duodenum. So we have an adolescent girl with provisional diagnosis of incomplete Kawasaki disease. However, the odd points were the hepatic involvement and severe acute gastritis and duodenitis with necrotic peripancreatic and periportal lymph nodes. So we had to search for literature if we were missing something. So on literature search, we found several case reports which documented jaundice as an unusual presentation. In fact, it is the second most common cause of acute febrile jaundice after viral hepatitis. 20% cases of KD have hyperbilirubinemia. The most common or most important mechanism of jaundice is biliary ductal compression by the mesenteric lymph nodes, which our child had, along with vasculitis of the hepatobiliary vessels. Then this is a case report where a child had presented with duodenitis leading to duodenal perforation as a complication of Kawasaki disease. In fact, there is also a research article in which 100 patients with GI manifestation and KD were compared with no GI manifestation and KD, 200 patients. So they found that the GI manifested children were more likely to have IVIG resistance and to develop coronary aneurysms statistically. Then we had this presence of necrotic lymph nodes in the abdomen. So we found an article from Japan in which 33 patients underwent lymph node examination, of which 26 were autopsies. So they have found that the Kawasaki disease can lead to lymph node changes not only in the cervical region but also throughout the body. And necrotic lesions were also found in the lymph nodes, possibly due to inflammation and also due to the circulatory disturbance and vasculitis. So all the loose ends were tied up, and then we took it as manifestations of Kawasaki disease, and we administered the child intravenous immunoglobulin and aspirin, with which there was rapid effervescence, relief of abdominal pain, and resolution of jaundice and rash. As you can see, the rash has completely disappeared in the first follow-up in the first 2 pictures, and this is the third picture, shows a child at 1 year follow-up. Echocardiography was normal at discharge at 6 weeks and at 1 year follow-up. The take-home messages is KD can occur in adolescents, and it is the second most common cause of acute febrile jaundice after viral hepatitis, and it can present as acute surgical abdomen as perforated abdominal ulcer, and it can involve not just the cervical lymph nodes but also lymph nodes throughout the body, and they may have necrotic changes. Actually, I think I still have time. The reason this case is memorable to me is that this was one of the challenging cases that I witnessed during MD, and this was a stimulating factor for me to pursue a career in pediatric immunology and rheumatology. Thank you.
Nice. Also. And did you do the pancreatic enzymes also in this patient? Pancreatic.
It's not mentioned here, but it was normal.
And any Nikolsky sign was positive? Nikolsky signs for STS, did you do? For STS, Stephen Johnson?
No, ma'am. No drug history, ma'am.
There was no history.
Thank you, sir.
So for the next presentation, I would like to invite Dr. Gayatri for her presentation.
Very good afternoon, one and all. I'll be presenting a child with a devastating sequelae of Kawasaki disease. She's a 17-year-old girl. She has been under her follow-up since 3 years of age. So at 3 years of age, when she presented to us, she had fever for 15 days, rash for 12 days, redness of eyes and lips and tongue for 10 days. On examination, she also had periannual desquamation. Her investigation showed neutrophilic leukocytosis, thrombocytosis, and high inflammatory parameters. So with these complaints presented to us on day 16 of illness, she was diagnosed as a complete Kawasaki disease, and she received IVIG on the same day of admission. Echocardiography was done on day 18 of illness and showed giant aneurysms involving the right coronary artery, left wing coronary artery, and left anterior descending artery. In view of coronary aneurysms and also resurgence of fever after IVIG, she received infliximab on day 20 of illness. So, these are serial echocardiographic findings. We can find that she had giant aneurysms involving the left wing coronary, left anterior descending, and a moderate aneurysm involving the right coronary artery. Though the LMC started showing signs of regression, LAD, aneurysm kept on increasing in size, and within 3 years of diagnosis, she also developed hyperacute shadow, which was identifiable in the echocardiography. So, at this point of time, she underwent catheter angiography, and it was confirmed that it was a calcification. She further underwent a stress myocardial perfusion scintigraphy, which showed a perfusion defect involving less than 5% of left ventricular myocardium. And she underwent a CT coronary angiography. We can here see the RCA aneurysm, fusiform aneurysm, and the fusiform aneurysm involving the proximal ad and LMCA. And here we can see the calcification involving the left anterior descending artery and right coronary artery. This picture again shows this diffuse dense calcification of the left anterior descending artery and aneurysmal dilatation of RCA with calcification. So the calcium scoring of this child was 2500, which was very high. Anything more than 400 is considered very severe, and the coronary arterial age was calculated to be more than 70 years when corresponding to her chronological age of 13 years. So she further underwent a cardiac MRI. Here we can see the left main right coronary artery aneurysm. Here the left main coronary and left anterior descending aneurysm. This is the native T1 mapping, post-contrast T1 mapping and T2 mapping, which were normal. And this is the first pass perfusion, which did not show any ventricular perfusion defects, and there was no early or late gadolinium enhancement. So this child was treated with IVIG and infliximab in the acute phase, and she was started on aspirin and warfarin. She received a short course of low molecular weight heparin when she was suspected to have a clot because of the hyperechoic lesion. However, when it was confirmed that it was a calcification, she was started on aspirin. So this is a recent treadmill ECG stress test which shows ST depression in the V3 to V5 leads at the peak exercise, and it recovered spontaneously to normal at the end, by the end of test. So we are planning to do a coronary flow reserve for the child post adenosine triphosphate administration and exercise stimulated MR or echocardiography, and to decide on further revascularization procedure. So she has been advised to avoid strenuous exercises and avoid marathon. This child has been discussed via email consultation with Professor Jane Burns, Najib Dada, and Professor Etsuko Suda, and she was discussed. The child was discussed yesterday in person also, and we have decided that we'll further go ahead with coronary flow reserve. If the CFR is less than 2, she may require coronary revascularization, and if there is evidence of severe stenosis, a coronary artery bypass graft may be considered. So I would like to emphasize that the coronary artery injury in Kawasaki disease can be more than the injury caused by atherosclerosis. This child had a delay in diagnosis and leading to early calcification also. This type of severe dense dystrophic calcification is the first to be reported in literature, and this can predispose to major adverse cardiovascular events. I would like to thank all the faculty members, residents and PhD students and staff, and Professor Manful Singhal, Professor of Radiology and Lead Cardiovascular Imaging. Thank you.
You mentioned 16 days delay in the diagnosis.
Yes, sir.
16 days.
Sir, she presented to us on day 16 of illness, sir. Sir, before she presented to us, she has gone to multiple hospitals. She was treated with multiple oral antimicrobials and IV antimicrobials, considering a possibility of enteric fever. Because of persistent fever, she was referred to PGI, and when she came to us, she was having all features of Kawasaki disease. Sorry?
Was she on steroids also?
No, ma'am. For this child, she was diagnosed in 2010. She has received only IVIG and infliximab. So that time we were not sure whether steroid can be given or not. So we had given her infliximab, and the intensification was with infliximab.
The results of her already released on further what she did again. Was anything else at this time?
No, ma'am, there was no active inflammation in the follicle, and the increase in size was because of the calcification, which kept on increasing and per se. Thank you.
So for the last presentation today, I would like to invite Dr. Ahmed for his presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. So, I'm Dr. Jamal. I'll be presenting an interesting case of early onset severe coronary calcification in a patient of KD with coronary artery aneurysms. My patient is Master S. He's a 10-year-old boy, resident of Nagpur, and has been under follow-up at our center since 2021. That is about 7 years of age. Initially in Jan 17, this patient presented with classical features of the disease with a high-grade fever, redness of eyes, oral mucosal changes, and a bilateral cervical lymphadenopathy. There was no history of associated generalized rash or dorsal edema of the extremities. Based on this, at about day 10 of illness, a diagnosis of Kawasaki disease was made, and he was treated with IVIG in an outside center in Nagpur and subsequently started on aspirin. Investigation at the time of presentation were that he had anemia for age. There was a developing thrombocytosis there was a neutrophilic leukocytic response, and the inflammatory parameters were significantly elevated, with ESR and CRP being quite high. The 2D echo that was done at the baseline revealed a left main coronary artery saccular aneurysm about 6.5 millimeters with an aneurysm of the right coronary artery. At this point of time, when the findings were the same, after about 14 days, warfarin was added. Serial echocardiography over the next 3 years revealed a persistence of giant coronary artery aneurysm in LMCA, whereas LAD and RCA were largely mentioned as being normal. At this point of time is when the patient got referred to us. In our unit, the baseline echo revealed a medium-sized aneurysm in the left main coronary artery with a giant aneurysm of left anterior descending with a thrombus extending from the distal LMCA to the proximal LAD. CTCA was done after about 2 days, where in the right coronary artery there were about 2 fusiform aneurysms, with the proximal aneurysm showing mural calcifications. The left anterior descending also showed a giant aneurysm with a calcified thrombosed aneurysm, as depicted in the picture. And the LCX was also showing an aneurysm. This was mostly an aneurysm that was extending from the distal LMCA into the proximal circumflex. The calcium score was calculated, which was about 485. So the main highlight of the case is it's a case of very early onset calcification in coronary artery aneurysm. It is within 3.5 years of disease onset. When upon review of literature, mostly we consider the development of calcification on an average after about 10 years of the acute illness. And if there has occurred a large or a giant coronary artery aneurysm in the acute phase, it increases the likelihood of development of subsequent calcification. The persistence of such lesions also further adds on to the risk of development of subsequent calcification. Another article published by Suji and et al. About the late wall thickening and calcification in patients after KD. If there is an acute coronary dilatation, it can lead to late abnormalities, artery calcification, and the prevalence of which increases, and it is commoner in males. Around 10% incidence of aneurysm occurs at 10 years after the disease onset, 38% at 20 years, and 72% at. Based on this literature, on the latest of AHA on the update and diagnosis of amongst the risk factor category of, they now suggest that if a patient or giant aneurysm, which means either, we should consider a baseline CTC months, and then we may even consider it every 1 to 5 years, and it needs to be patient. So based on messages are that the timing of needs to be individualized for the patient. Fits all. Follow-up CTC should be done earlier in patients with persistent lesions or giant coronary aneurysms, and further research needs to be. And calcium scoring is an indispensable part of the follow-up CTCA in KD. I acknowledge my members, fellow PhD student staff, and of course, Manful Singhal sir. Thank you.
Now moving over to so I would like to invite additional professor in the Department of Pediatrics to chair the next session.
Thank you, Dr. Vignesh. So, good afternoon, everyone. So, I'll be talking about the role of innate immunity in Kawasaki disease.